gosh, what a wonderful evening. This, together with yesterday's march, I feel totally sated and grateful. Thank you. Environmental conservation and the fight against climate change are issues that are very near and dear to my heart. And I just want to say that the word honor has been knocked around a lot tonight, but it is my pleasure and distinct honor to introduce the Honorable Al Gore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kira, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And before I say anything else, I want to deliver my main message. Congratulations to all 25 winners tonight. You are inspiring. Thank you for what you've done. You are an inspiration. I'll tell you, if you all can do so much with so little, why can't governments do more with all of the resources that they have? What about that march? Wasn't that great? Thank you for taking. How many of you all took part in the march? Could I see a show of hands? All right. Well, it was a statement. It was a great symbol of the rising determination of people to do something about the climate crisis. And there's an old African proverb, when you pray, move your feet. And we moved our feet yesterday. And I think people, if they didn't get the message yesterday, they will get it sooner rather than later, because this is just the beginning. I also want to acknowledge to this audience how important it is, and this program has made it clear, that the entire world recognize the equal role of women and women's empowerment in the movement to develop the poor countries and save the climate. We are behind in taking action. We are behind in recognizing that the cause of saving the climate and the cause of sustainably developing the economy and society in order to empower and lift up those who have had so little must go together in every way. So I'm just going to say a few words to you. I started by telling you that you are an inspiration. You really are. I hope that doesn't sound like a cliche. But I have had the privilege of being involved in the struggle to solve the climate crisis for a long enough time that I've learned to recharge my personal batteries with the hope and inspiration from people at the grassroots level who are working every day to make this happen in the right way. The challenge we face is daunting, and I'm going to talk about that briefly, but I don't want you to get hung up on how hard it is and how big and scary the problem is. We need to know it, and we need to realize it, because it's not going to be easy to solve, but once we get moving in the right direction, it's going to be a lot easier than people think. And as one of those reports that came out a few days ago made clear in great detail, it may actually save us money all the way around, because we're not even counting all of the full costs of the dirty fuels that we're burning and the ridiculously irresponsible practices that we're pursuing. But you know the basics on this. We're putting 98 million tons of global warming pollution up into the air every single day. Just like we're acting as if the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet is an open sewer. In years and decades past, some factories would dump poison liquid waste into the rivers that ran through communities where people lived, and they thought it was okay to do that. They thought they just had a right to use the rivers as open sewers. But finally, enough people connected the dots and said, whoa, wait a minute here. That river belongs to all of us. Actually, we belong to the river in a manner of speaking. It is not your open sewer. You cannot pollute that way. Why is it that we could learn that lesson and then do something about it and protect clean water and stop irresponsible and reckless water pollution in so many places, and still not see that the same thing is wrong when it comes to gaseous waste being poured into the atmosphere as if that is a sewer? 98 million tons a day has added up. You know the numbers, 400 parts per million is what the scientists say. It's a little above that now, but here's another way of thinking about it. The cumulative amount of these gases that are up there now from man-made sources now traps as much extra heat energy every single day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. That's an honest-to-goodness fact. And it's a big planet, but that's a lot of energy. And that's what's raising the temperatures, and 90% of it goes into the oceans. And when Super Typhoon Haiyan came across the Pacific Ocean and hit the Philippines, it crossed waters that were 3.5 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, and it became the strongest storm ever to make landfall and caused 4 million homeless refugees. It's not that easy to recover from such a blow. And here in this city, when Superstorm Sandy came across the windward areas of the Atlantic Ocean, it crossed waters that were 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, more than 5 degrees Celsius. And so it devastated this city. And people saw what the strength and force and destructive power of these storms can be and how they're growing. And of course, the extra heat in the oceans causes them to evaporate more water vapor up into the sky, and that means the sky is much more humid, 4% more humidity, and so when the storms release a downpour, we get these enormous downpours. My hometown of Nashville, Tennessee, had what they called a once-in-a-thousand-year rainfall just 3 years ago. Thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses and didn't have any flood insurance because there had never been any floods in the memory of man in those areas. And there are places all over the world where that's happening. In Pensacola, Florida, in April, 2 feet of rain in 26 hours. That's not normal, and it's happening all over the place. And that same extra heat that causes the downpours and then the massive floods and the mudslides in many places and the disruption of agriculture, that same heat also pulls the moisture out of the soils and causes these deeper droughts. California today is 100% in drought, 58% in exceptional drought, the highest category. And all over the world, you can see where these events are happening, and the farmers are worried, and they should be worried. And you see in the tropical diseases being driven, and the ice is melting, and the sea level is rising. And I could go on, but those are the impacts that should awaken us to the fact that we can't wait anymore. We have got to take this under control. We are paying the cost of carbon in all these extreme weather events and the collapse of governance in many areas. You look at Syria, 2006 to 2010, worst drought in their history, climate related. 60% of their farms were destroyed, 80% of their livestock killed, 1 million refugees driven from the rural areas into Damascus and the other cities where they collided with another million refugees already there from the Iraq War. And WikiLeaks published a document where the internal Syrian ministers were saying, we can't handle this, it's going to cause an explosion. We've got to do something about it. Well, the rest is history, and there were many causes that opened the gates of hell in Syria. But when the environmentalists and when the U.S. Pentagon says, hey, wait a minute, this is going to cause crisis after crisis in places around the world, and failures of governance and chaos and millions and hundreds of millions of climate refugees. What are we waiting for? These are the kinds of consequences that should be motivating every person on earth to stand up and say, we are going to solve this crisis. We have got to, and we have what it takes to put the solutions in place. Now, here's the good news. We have seen the development of alternative energy, sustainable forestry, sustainable organic no-till farming, and practices in making buildings and cities and communities more sustainable and low energy, and many of them zero carbon. And it's gotten to the point now where, well, The Onion had a headline. Those of y'all from other countries, maybe you know that The Onion is too, but they had a headline saying, scientists politely remind government that renewable energy is ready to go whenever. So, let me tell you a quick story that is relevant to understanding what's happened with photovoltaic solar energy that produces electricity from the rays of the sun. I remember back in the day when the first big clunky mobile phone handsets came out. Some of y'all are as old as I am and may remember that. Oh, I thought that thing was so cool. I've always wanted to be an early adopter. When I was in the Congress, I used to call up one of my buddies in the summer and say, hey, you want to have dinner? And so I got one of those things, and I called him, and I walked over to his house while I was talking to him. He said, yeah, come on over. When can you get here? And knock, knock, knock. He opened the door. Whoa, it was like the Wild and Crazy Guys on the old Saturday Night Live. And I thought that thing looked so cool. I look at those pictures now and think, boy, that looks dumb. But back when those phones came out, AT&T was then the only company, Ma Bell. They said, hey, maybe we can sell some of those things. Let's do a study and figure out how many we might be able to sell so we can plan ahead. This is 1980. By the year 2000, the study came back, you're going to be able to sell 900,000 of those phones around the world. Oh boy, they got excited over that. 2000 came, they sold 109 million. This year there are 6.5 billion of those cell phones, and another 1.2 billion new ones sold every year. So here's my question about that technology. Why were the leading experts in the world not only wrong about how quickly that technology would develop, but way, way wrong? Why? Well, I think there are 4 reasons. Number one, we haven't been used to seeing what high technology can do to bring the cost down for technologies that become popular. We saw it with computer chips, and some technologies benefit from that. And when it comes down exponentially, people go, whoa, that's a surprise. Second thing, we are not used to, from the past, the cost coming down when the quality goes way up at the same time. Wow. Now these mobile phones are supercomputers. Number 3, who buys them? Not bureaucracies, not utilities, not big institutions. People buy them, and they decide that they want the empowerment of these things. And number 4, most importantly, they didn't stop to think. In the developing parts of the world where the majority of the people live, they didn't have landline telephone grids. They were ready to leapfrog to the next technology and not wait until they repeated the pattern of the West. So it just exploded. Now here's my point. Solar photovoltaic panels have the exact same characteristics. An exponential curve starts out slow, looks like nothing's happening, looks like it's going nowhere, and then it starts to go up just a little bit, and then it shoots straight up. That has happened right now with solar energy. Do you know there are 79 countries in the world today where the cost of electricity from solar photovoltaic panels is equal to or cheaper than the cost of electricity from coal and all other sources. 79 countries. And within 6 years, as the cost continues down, the best studies show that more than 80% of the people in the entire world will live in regions where solar electricity will be equal to or cheaper than the price from other sources. What are we waiting for? We need to go in a big way to develop pollution-free, green, carbon-free solar electricity. Come on. What are we waiting for? Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, is installing 2 rooftop PV panels every minute, night and day. It's taken off like a skyrocket. How much new electricity generating capacity came here in this country from coal this year? You know the answer is 0. Because it's no longer competitive and because activists have helped to shut down so many of the coal plants in the United States. Wind power, 2.5 cents per kilowatt, way cheaper than the alternative. Okay, so the carbon polluting, big monopoly, dominant companies of the past are using their wealth and political power and connections to try to hold back this revolution that I believe is unstoppable. But let me tell you, when the cost gets cheaper, it's sort of like the difference between 0 degrees and 1 degree Celsius or 33 degrees and 32 degrees Celsius. That's not a difference of 1 degree. It's the difference between ice and water. And in the same way, the difference between more expensive than and cheaper than is not a minor difference. It's a difference between markets that are frozen up and markets that are liquid. And as the price continues to come down, Katie, bar the door. This revolution is going to be unstoppable. And I'll tell you something that happens that convinces me that the political system can no longer stay in the way. In Atlanta, Georgia, I had some tweets back and forth today. I don't know the person, but I read an interview with her. She was one of the original founders of one of the major Tea Party groups in the United States. Very conservative Tea Party Republican. And so Georgia Power, which has a monopoly over electricity in Georgia, decided to put a tax, get the legislature, you know, they have their minions like ALEC and these groups that groom the legislators to do what the polluters want. And they got them to introduce legislation to put a tax on anybody who installs a solar panel on the roof. And this Tea Party person said, "What? What?" So the Atlanta Tea Party joined forces with the Sierra Club, and they created a new organization, and you know what they called it? The Green Tea Party. And they defeated that legislation in the Georgia state legislature. And all across the United States, Republican-controlled legislatures have not been able to stand up to the public pressure from people, regardless of party or ideology, who had the same reaction. You want to keep me from using solar instead of coal? You got another thing coming. Because I mentioned these tweets back and forth. The last tweet that she sent back my way ended with "solar equals freedom." Solar equals freedom. All right, I'm going to close here because you've had a long evening, and I am honored to be able to congratulate you and to thank you. And I want to say just two other things. First of all, do not get discouraged. We're going to win this. The only question is how long it's going to take us to win this. Don't feel depressed. Don't feel like solving the climate crisis is this heavy burden that you've got to carry that just makes you feel depressed. I want you to feel the joy of having work to do that justifies every effort that you can expend to get it done. We are the generation of people alive today that are going to make the difference for the future of human civilization. So that's my first point. Do not weary in well-doing. We are going to win. The great American poet in the 20th century, Wallace Stevens, once wrote a line that said, after the last no, there comes a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends. We've had a lot of no's, but a yes is coming. And you know what? Every great social movement, the abolition movement, the movement for women's equality and voting rights, the movement for civil rights, the movement to end apartheid, the movement to end the nuclear arms race, the movement for equality and freedom for the LGBT community, all of these movements faced no after no after no, but after the last no came a yes, because any question, when it is finally resolved into a binary choice between what is right and what is wrong, has a foreordained conclusion because of who we are as human beings. We are going to do what is right as soon as the choice is clear, and it is becoming clear, because Mother Nature is speaking up and saying, we've got to do it. And the technology businesses are showing us that the cost is coming down and we have the opportunity. So we have to make that choice. Now, finally, years from now, the next generation. I was president of the Senate. I appreciate that. A future generation will assess these times and will make a judgment about those of us who were alive when we had the privilege of doing this work. And depending upon the circumstances in which they find themselves in the future, they'll ask one of two questions. I believe I know which one it will be. But the first choice is, if they find themselves in a world of rising sea levels and hundreds of millions of climate refugees and stronger, more destructive storms and chaos with the failure of governance and crop failures and all of the parade of horribles that the scientists have been warning us about almost at the top of their lungs, that generation would be well justified to look back on us and ask, what were you thinking? How could you possibly have failed to see and hear and feel and connect the dots and understand and then rise up and act? What were you thinking? But if that generation finds themselves in a world filled with hope, a world of renewal with hundreds of millions of new jobs, retrofitting buildings to be efficient, installing solar panels and windmills and energy efficiency and sustainable forestry and sustainable fishing and sustainable agriculture and building up communities that are healing communities. And if they look at their own children and feel in their hearts that their children's lives are going to be even better still, I want them to look back on us in our day and time and ask that other question. How did you find the moral courage to shake off the lethargy, to open your eyes and open your hearts and put your hands to work to build the future? And part of the answer will be, a big part of the answer will be, that the grassroots heroes and heroines of the kind of men and women who win the Equator Awards led the way to build a sustainable future. We've got everything we need. Let's get to work and let's get this job done. Thank you.